right. Good morning. Good morning again. I know some of you I saw on Tuesday. Welcome back. And today we're going to be doing these watercolors. Does everyone have a paper towel, a brush? We've been using these for every class lately. One large pointed or round brush and then one smaller one. Let me make sure this focuses properly. It's going wild. Okay. And then you should have a palette, a cup of water, and then 2 sheets of paper, one small, one large. I'm just going to take a moment to take a deep breath and be here. Okay, so everyone's also got one of these handouts for reference if you want some inspiration. And for this style of watercolor, I'm leaving a lot of white gaps in between each petal. That's kind of like the outline. So you can see this one here as an example. And then here's another small sample I'll keep on the side if anyone wants to see this for reference. So for those of you who are new here, you have 2 of these sheets, one small, one large, because the small is kind of a test sheet or warm-up sheet. So you can test out colors, marks, practice on here first, which is what we're going to do. And then afterwards, we'll make a larger painting on here of something that's more composed like this piece. So for this practice, we can practice painting the petals. The nice thing about the marigolds, let me switch to the smaller one, is that the petals. The petals are fairly loose and they have ragged edges, so you can kind of just twitch. I don't know if twitch is a good word, but do loose strokes with your brush to make these rough edges. So I'll demonstrate here, for example. Let's say I want to make one of these orangey yellow ones. I think this color matches quite well with the marigold color. This one is, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did I count that right? Yeah, 5, 6 down. So I'm going to take some water and swish this back and forth here. And I'm going to pick up a lot of water. This is a completely new palette, and so this surface is still very smooth, and it's kind of hydrophobic to where the water's all kind of collecting in one spot. After some use, it won't do that as much.
So you use both 2 colors, right?
Well, right now I'm doing just this kind of orangey yellow. And later on, if I want to do one that's got some red in the center, I can add it on top. We can practice the wet on wet technique here as well, which is where you put wet paint on a wet surface. But first we'll just practice some of these strokes here. We could even just practice one flower. So once you've got some of your color, one thing I want to help you make sure that you do is that you don't have too much paint in your brush. You can tell this one it's very plump looking, like it's almost rounded out with how much pigment or water is in there. If you squeeze this on the edge of this palette, it removes some of the excess water, and now you can see that it's kind of shrunk a little bit. It's not as plump looking. That's how much water I'm looking for. And you can see what I'm talking about if you try testing it out on your paper. If I just make a mark like that, this is fairly flat. I'm trying to show you how shiny it is from the wetness, if I can get it at a good angle. Oh, there we go. So you can see that's a flat, even sheen. If I did not remove that excess water and it's this plump, then I might have this much water on my paper, which is starting to puddle. You can see the difference there. So I don't want it to puddle right now because I want to have my paints mix evenly. So the more water you've got, the more wild your blends are going to become, and the colors will just flow wherever your water flows. So if you've got a puddle, it's going to flow around the puddle. I'll show you what happens if I try to add some wet paint to each of these. Let's say I'm going to use the red. And if I drop this in, on this one, it'll bloom like that. That one has an even amount of water on it. Now this one has much more, and this is blooming a little bit less predictably, and it's also blooming a lot more. And once it's dry, it'll look a little bit different. If I were to tilt the paper, this one spreads out a lot more too. So this isn't necessarily bad, but it's a different effect if you want something that's more unpredictable and has a very wet effect. But if you want something that's more smooth, just this flat sheen of water with pigment is what you're looking for. So that's my main tip for this wet on wet technique. Any questions on that part? I know I've covered it many times in this class, but it always helps to practice. Okay, so that's more or less how I would approach these petals here. Some of them are very red on the inside, and then they've got these yellow edges on the very outside. So if I were to paint that one specifically, I would start with this yellow layer, and I have plenty of it here I can reuse. And I've noticed in the middle of the marigold, I'm going to maybe put it here, just a few of these lines coming out of the center. And I'm going to paint this one at a slight angle, kind of similar to maybe this one, where it's, I would say the petals are a bit smaller on the top sides, and then I make them longer on the bottom side to make it look like it's at an angle. So you'll notice this loop here is kind of closer to the top, and then this one is wider on the bottom. So since these petals are quite loose, I'm just scratching like this with my brush to make some marks. And while this is still wet, which means it's still shiny, I'm going to drop a little bit of the red on the inside edge. And I'm using very little water for the red. The more water I use, the more it will bloom, and I don't want it to bloom that much. So in this case, I grabbed it directly from the palette without adding much water, and then put it right on top. So this technique takes a lot of practice to pin down. You might need to play around with how much water you use over and over again until you get a feel for it. So don't feel bad if you can't get it right away. It's taken me many years of practice to pin this down and get a good feel for it. So I'll paint this one more time. You can go ahead and try it if you haven't already, but I'll paint it one more time to demonstrate it. Here I'm going back with this yellow, making sure I use enough water so that the paint is still shiny, wet on this paper surface. And I'm removing that excess water by rubbing it against this ridge here. If this technique is new to you, I know it's a lot of information that I just dropped, and I'll be happy to repeat any techniques or explanations if you get stuck. Remember, you can look at this photo reference if you are looking for ideas for shapes. I used to not have any photo reference, but I found that it's really nice to have more data or more information through photo reference, because without it, all you have is my painting, and you might not want to make yours look like mine exactly. You might prefer the photo, or to do your own creative interpretation of it. Okay, red here. Anyone have any questions on this part, or anyone stuck? I'm here to help. Hi.
Is that the right brush I should be using?
Yeah, you can be using this one. With the practice sheet, I think the smaller ones are fine. When we get to this one, you might want to switch to the larger brush.
One?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you're going for the wet on wet technique like I'm doing, I can show you some tips too. Just let me know. These are looking nice. Both of mine are kind of facing upward. If I wanted to, I can have them tilt more to the left or to the right. Some of these in the photo, or many of them are straight on and they're not tilted. You can see more side views or angled views on the bottom bouquet. I'll give everyone a chance to practice this a bit more before we move on to this larger sheet. And I'll also give everyone a chance to practice the leaves later. I think I'll paint one more and then I'll move on to the larger one. With these marigolds, there are so many petals, you could add many layers of them. I only did about 2, but you could do like 3, maybe even 4, depending on how big you make your petals. I'm going to try making one with more layers of petals just to see how it looks. And I'm also aiming for a more raggedy edge on my petals. This one's much bigger. Okay. I'll try this red here. Even if you don't do the wet technique on this one, where the yellow layer dries, I think it can still look very nice. And if you're having a hard time getting the technique with this flower shape, you can practice with just a small, simple shape first, like I did on this corner here. Now, this is actually almost a little too dry. It's shiny enough. And I can practice putting wet paint on wet here. Well, it's working. And show you what happens if it's too dry. If it's too dry, then it won't spread at all. And it kind of just sits wherever I place my brush. It doesn't bloom. This one's too dry. This one's blooming a little bit. Now, when we're practicing this technique, what we're doing is also practicing water control. Or lack of. Or you're learning how to control your water. And that's, I think that's honestly the hardest part. I'm constantly adjusting how wet or how dry my brush is by either dabbing it on paper towel or squeezing the excess out on here. So I usually have a paper towel on my hand or just on the side where I'm gently drying out my brush if it's too wet. Okay, I'll take one last check before we continue here. Any questions? Would anyone like me to demonstrate on their paper?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, I just can't really get anything going.
Okay. I think you've got a good amount of pigment. What you need is more water. So you see how it's not blending?
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's too dry. It has to be wet surface with wet paintbrush for it to blend. So right now I'm going to rinse this out really quick. Let's say I'm going to use maybe this color. And this is how much water I'm going to be putting down. I've already gone back in here 3 times just to pick up water.
Okay.
Maybe like 2 times there for this color. So that's how wet I'm going for. And this is filled with too much paint right now. It's a little plump, so I'm going to remove a little bit like that.
Okay.
And then I'll just make one mark right there. What you have there is a good level of wetness, but I think you need more pigment to make it darker. Now this one's even puddling a little bit right there. I can remove it if I dry out my brush like this and soak it up like that. Then, while this is still shiny and wet, I'm going to add some of this red, and making sure I don't have too much water in this either, because if I have too much water here, it'll blend too much. It'll bloom all over the place. So on this one, I'm aiming to have it be a bit drier. You see it's not flowing like that one.
Okay.
And then I'm going to drop that in there. You can kind of tease it out. If I wanted it to bloom more, I could make it even more wet. Let's see. I think that's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how you get it to blend. You just need to use more water.
All right.
And you might accidentally overdo it at first, but with some practice, you can find a balance with how much to use.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else looking for help or tips? Okay. Well, now that you've gotten some practice, we can move on to this larger sheet and start to make a composition. What I've been doing with most of my flower paintings is kind of making a curve that goes down. It can be like an S curve or maybe half of one. So I have one on the right, left, right, something like that, and I kind of make it a little bit uneven. Like this one's more in the center, these are more on the sides. And then with this composition, it's a little bit cropped. I have one, it's quite similar. It's like this. So if you want to imagine you have like an S shape on your paper, you can kind of trace it with your flowers. to make something that looks like it's flowing. You could also do a big bunch in the center if you want it to be more of a centerpiece. Or simply maybe copy one of these if you prefer to have them look like they're just lying on a table with some of these leaves in the back. This is probably the simpler thing to do, or an easier thing to do, and this one would be more advanced. And this one's quite full with leaves as well. I think maybe for today I'll start with this one or something similar to that one. So I'd recommend switching to the larger brush for the larger paper so you can cover more area more quickly. And we'll just do the exact same thing we did when we practiced, except we need to use more paint this time because we're painting larger. More paint and more water. If your paint seems too dry, I want you to see how much water I have on here. I've dipped my paintbrush into the water quite a few times to get this consistency, and also into my palette to get enough of the paint. And always remember, you can use this test sheet after you've mixed your paints to make sure it's the color that you want, or maybe the level of darkness or water. This one, I have too much water in here, so it's puddling. I'm gonna remove the excess paint in my brush by rubbing it on this edge here, and then I can actually soak this out if I get enough out. If not, the easier way is to just remove the paint on the paper towel and then remove this. Whenever I'm removing paint or water from my brush, I'm kind of turning it into a vacuum because it's drier than the surface of my paper. So the water likes to go wherever it can be soaked up, like a sponge. Well, now that I have a good consistency of paint, I'm going to start painting my flowers on here. I'm going to make it very similar to this or this, so I'll just start on one. Oops. I can tell this is too wet because there's a droplet on the end of my brush. That's too wet. Okay, maybe around here with a little bit of space above and on the sides so I have room for petals. Just add a few thin strokes here. I'm trying to use the very tip of my brush, so I'm holding it kind of almost 90 degrees to the paper so I can only have the tip touching. So it's almost straight up and down. And then when I get to the petals, I want to hold this at more of an angle. Maybe I'll do trying to make sure I leave some white gaps in between each petal. Just going back and forth. And I'm holding the brush kind of, I guess, perpendicular to the direction that the petal is going. I can also rotate my paper to get the angle that I want. That looks a little bit too raggedy. I'm going to round it out a little bit. Oops. Maybe I'll add like some of these bigger. If you're not sure how much white to leave, I would suggest starting out with more white gaps or bigger ones, and then if the gaps look too big, then you can always fill them in. You can't go the other way around with watercolor. You can't add whites back in. So it's better to start with too much white. There's one. I made this one a bit smaller than I did on my sample. That's okay. It's also better to start a bit too small than too big because you can always make it bigger by adding more petals.
No.
I'll try adding a bit more and make it smaller. Okay, that's a really big marigold. I've used enough water, so this is still all wet all the way across. Now I can go back with the red. If yours ended up drying in the process, but you wanted it to stay wet, you could put paint back on it. You could add another layer of paint. And if you don't use too much pigment, then it should look about the same. And if it's already dark enough, sometimes you can just add water on top. Just make sure you don't rub your brush really roughly on the surface of the paper. Otherwise, you could be rubbing the paper raw. But I think this one doesn't have that much of an issue. I mean, this particular brand and type of paper. But in general, with watercolor, you want to be light on the surface with your brush. This red that I'm putting in here is just on the inside edge of each petal so that I have kind of a yellow outline there. And I've managed to do this because I have a decent level of water control here, so I can make sure it doesn't spread out too much. But that might be the challenging bit if you're new to the technique or if you're still practicing. If it bleeds too much, you can kind of remove it with a dry brush. And I'm doing that right here, smoothing it out. I wonder if I can get this a little bit higher. Oops, maybe this is better. Yeah, this part's not so easy. Is it the water control that's difficult?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
You want me to take a look?
I think I have too many white spaces.
Yeah, you've made yours very even all the way around. But if you want it to look a bit more organic, you can make some of the ones on the bottom larger, or you can even connect some of them, and the ones on top a bit shorter. If I had a pencil, I can kind of show you a drawing. I have a pen. I can draw what I'm talking about here. So this shape, we've got the center, and the next layer, and then the next layers. It looks something like this if you want it to look more, if you want it to look like it's facing one direction or it's a bit tilted, then your petals are going to be larger on the bottom and a bit shorter on the top. This is what gives it a little bit of perspective. Which is why you'll see on my painting I have really short and smaller petals near the top, and then they become wider on the bottom and on some of the left and right sides a bit. I can do the same thing here. This is the same thing but facing the other way. Yeah. Here we go. I'm going to continue to add more here. These flowers can be painted very loosely, so it doesn't have to be completely even all the way across. Let me try to paint a looser one. I'm going to put another flower maybe here. Try to look at that, for example. Wow. I think I painted this one a bit more loosely. It's a bit more abstract looking, I think. And then I'm going to drop this red in there. Even this red can be put in a bit loosely. I'm just making sure there's like a bit of yellow in between the red sections. So some of this is a little bit muddled.
Offset. No, that's good. This is a pretty color too.
I know with the way we've been doing these paintings, we haven't been starting with the sketch, so that makes it more challenging.
You got that right.
Maybe in some of our future classes, we'll start with a sketch.
With a pencil first?
Yeah, I would use pencil, maybe something that's lighter so it doesn't show too much.
Just a regular pencil, not like the pencil we used the other day.
No, that would be too dark.
This is standard.
That pencil was the darkest one I could find that was a set. Yeah, we could use a standard pencil to make some sketches. And I think maybe that would replace the little bit of warm-up at the beginning. I think in this style of painting, we're using the existing painting marks as our guideline, such as starting with the center and then moving our way outward. That's kind of the guiding point. But yeah, for this, I recommend making the petals larger and larger as you move outward in general. Some of the outer edges, I've made them quite small. This is, again, for perspective. So the petals that are further away from the viewer are going to be smaller. And the ones closer to you will be larger, kind of just like what I did in this little drawing here. Maybe I'll keep this. Actually, right there's good. Leave these up here as a sample. It's looking nice.
That's when you have too much water in the middle.
Oh, really?
I mean,
Oh, because it's spreading out?
yeah.
Well, I love the texture that you have here. That's looking nice. Yeah. That's looking better.
Oh gosh. Well,
Yeah, I actually see it's blending a bit right there.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a good shape.
Practice.
Mm-hmm. You're getting better.
Okay.
It's definitely an improvement from this one to that one.
Yeah, definitely takes practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like to remind everyone all the time, watercolor is considered the hardest painting medium to learn. So if you're having a hard time, you're in the perfect spot. I was fortunate enough to have parents who put me through art classes when I was young, but I was also the worst one in my class. I think I was the youngest one there and the least experienced, and every single week, it was a weekly class, I'd go in and I'd feel so disappointed and really sad because I was constantly comparing mine to my classmates. And my teacher would speak in a dialect of Chinese I didn't understand, so I was just trying to copy him without understanding what he was saying at all. And so I kind of had to just, from a lot of observation, figure out what he was doing. And yeah, I have to say watercolor is very, very tricky.
Where were you at that point? Where did you live?
In Fremont.
In Fremont?
Yeah, not too far.
Okay.
But yeah, I remember spending every single class feeling extremely frustrated. Yeah. If I still had my early paintings, I would show them to you, but I don't think I have them anymore. They don't look all that different from yours. For those who are ready or who want to see this part, I'm going to practice some leaves and then add them to the painting. These leaves are kind of, they're spear shaped, but they've got some ridges on the edges. So I'll just show how to make the shape. And for the color, I recommend, I think either of these greens are okay. I'm going to use this one that's next to this light green. I'm using about the same amount of water and pigment as the petals we've been painting. Now let's say I have a stem coming out. And this green is very green. If you want a warmer green, you can mix it with some of this, maybe this brown to make it more of an army green. This is fine too. If I have a stem here, then for the leaf what I would do is make another line coming out of it. And then from maybe the bottom side, I'll just make these little strokes.
Oh, that looks good.
And the goal is to make them pretty even. You can make them shorter at first if you're afraid of making them too long. That's how it looks if I start at that end. I can also start at this end and work my way down. So this is a bunch of individual strokes here. And I'm cleaning it up afterwards to make sure the shape is kind of spear shaped. Oops, that's looking a little light. Need more pigment. I'm trying to use just the tip of my brush here. So I'm holding it at almost a 90-degree angle from the paper. I'll continue to paint more of those on this larger sheet here. And I'm going to try making an olive green by mixing that dark green with a little bit of the light brown. I'm going to test it out on this little sheet before I put it on the big one. Make sure it's the green that I want. Okay, looks a little dark. Add more water. That's a little better. Okay. So these have, oops, I messed up. So I just accidentally put a green mark on here while it's still wet, and since the first layer is dry, if I take a slightly damp paper towel and dab it, that'll remove it a bit. If the first layer of yellow was still wet, then it would remove the yellow as well, but because it's dry, it's not removing as much of it when I do this. I don't know if I can completely erase that, but I can at least get this much off. Damp paper towel. Okay, let me go back in here. So stem. And these straight lines can be tricky to paint as well. It's easier if you can rest the side of your hand on the table to help stabilize it versus having your hand float in the air. And hopefully your flowers are dry at this point so that you can't smudge them. That looks too light. Hold on. This looks very dark. I think it looks even darker on the screen.
Well, and it always lightens up when it dries too.
It does, yeah. It will lighten up a bit. Let me see if I can get this to show better. I'll try to add this on both sides. This is kind of tricky. Wait. I'm going to turn my paper to make it easier. I'm going to add a lot of leaves to fill up this white space. It's okay if they overlap.
Can I come and peek at your work?
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Must be Thursday.
It's Thursday. Oh my gosh. Lovely. Wow. Hi there. Look at you. You're getting some on there. Yeah.
You're the inspector here?
No, I love art. So when I see people painting, I'm always like, oh, I wanna see. As long
That's
as you don't
fun.
mind me peeking, I love it. And everybody has a different.
Everything's different.
Yeah, it's
Everything's
different,
different.
right? One flower, you look at that flower and how it comes out on your page and your paper. It's all kind of different, right?
And they all look good,
See, they do. They do. They're note card quality. Very lovely.
While you're here, you can help us deal with our frustrations.
Now class. That's lovely. You're like, yeah. Isn't it fun though, even if it's not exactly?
Yeah.
You know?
It is fun.
Yeah, I love art. And now and I was gonna say now I want to see yours, but of course you're up on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That's me.
Yeah. So are you through college, or do you just come on your own, or are you?
I'm a vendor,
You're a
right?
vendor.
I'm considered a vendor. Yeah.
But a freelance vendor, like not
Yeah.
from a. Okay, very good. What's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
name?
Cassie.
Cassie. I'm Mary.
Nice to meet you,
Nice
Mary.
To meet you.
Thanks for dropping by.
Yeah.
It's fun here.
Yeah, I love
Now,
to see.
And you teach at other places too.
Yeah, yeah, other retirement communities as well.
Yeah, mostly all in this area. Like,
Yeah, it's all South Bayish because I live in
Mhm.
South San Jose.
Okay.
It's closer. Yeah.
That's great. You have your little setup here. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, this has come in handy a lot with teaching. Yeah.
Because they can see large, and it's like, yeah, that's really nice.
Mhm.
And you got the fall colors going on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, ladies and
Marigolds.
gentlemen, have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye. I can't put a face with that name, no.
She was, well, you know, we wouldn't remember anybody because we don't look the same. But anyway, she was a friend of mine.
Marion Smith?
Marin Smith.
Marin Smith.
M-A-R, yeah. anyway, she's our same age, and she's in watercolor and painting for all her life.
I like her.
And then they draw
Are you still in touch with her?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, maybe she can give you some private.
I'm gonna add a little bud on this one.
I think that might destroy our friendship.
I know, I was gonna ask you how, that bud over there on that smaller one is,
Well, she used to live
it's
in
good. I like your bud.
This one?
everything.
Or
Yes, yes.
up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at that time I was trying to emulate this one, because this one, it's small, but it's also facing upward, so it's a side view. And then,
See, I didn't notice that on there, I just noticed yours, and I said, oh.
yeah, it's on here. And then some of these have just buds. I think I'm going to try adding one right here. It's just a little, oops, it's a little bit too green. I have a greenish yellow there. I'll clean that up. Oops.
And she's not in that great a shape. I mean, neither am I, but she's
If your palette gets muddy with color, you can clean it by adding water
huge.
and kind of wiping it on top.
Half dome in the winter time that she did
Here's a little bud.
in my bedroom. So,
Oh, how nice.
but I was just thinking of this. She,
I need more orange.
That's a really good flower there. Yeah. Like what she did.
not
This
mine.
is,
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
I have to go.
A win for me. Okay. See you next time.
it's orange bud.
What? Scott.
You can add little buds like this one to fill up space if you have a lot of space on yours, or keep adding more leaves.
Oh, well, that looks great.
Yeah, this is a
I mean,
simple,
it's a tulip
it
shape,
looks
but
like a tulip,
fabulous.
yeah.
Oh, it looks great.
If I add a little bit of, let's say, this bottom bit to make this thicker, maybe it'll look less like a tulip. Whoops, it's bleeding in there a little bit. I'll clean it up. Okay.
You did a nice job. That's good. You got one more one, right?
It's 4 minutes to 12.
Oh, my
If anyone needs to get going, bye, thanks for coming. You can leave the supplies here, we'll clean it up for you.
Don't close the paints if there's paint on your palette.
Oh yeah, if it's still
Dries
wet.
on and hard to get it off.
Yeah, you can wipe off the paint with a damp paper towel. I just dip mine in my cup and you can wipe it like this. But the rest we can take care of. It's always going to stain. This one was a new set and it's already all orange and green.
But a stain is different than caked on paint.
Yeah, that's different. At least with watercolor it'll reactivate, so if it's on there you can remove it with water.
Unless it
Oh,
sits
no,
for
that
a
one,
week.
I love the way the center is, way up. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Just add another stem there. Any questions or anything before we wrap up? Oh, these look great.